Story that's always worth telling again. So here we go. And this story starts in the land that we know as the place where Jesus lived and taught people about God, that dry land. And this story happened sometime after Jesus was born, and we're not exactly sure when. It might have been a few months after, it might have been a few years after, but it was sometime in that period. And as the story goes, it happened in the town called Bethlehem. And that's the town we hear about in the Christmas story with the angels and shepherds and the manger and the stable. And this happened in a particular house in Bethlehem. This was the house of Mary and Joseph and Jesus. And they were just doing their normal, everyday kind of thing, eating and going off to work or whatever needed to be done, and then coming back to the house in the evening. Just kind of ordinary days. But thousands of miles away, in a very different land, in that land, there were 3 travelers. Actually, we're not sure that there were 3. The story doesn't actually tell us how many, but for today we're going to say there were 3. And they lived in this land and had never heard of this place here at all. But they had heard that there was going to be a star that appeared that would lead them to a place where there was a child that would be a new king. And they thought that was kind of a neat thing to happen. And so they waited, and sure enough, one day, a star appeared. And they thought, that must be the one that's going to take us to this place. So they got on their camels and they started the long journey out of their land and to this land that they knew nothing about. And they followed this star. But when they got to this land, they didn't know where they were supposed to go next. And they thought, well, the best thing to do would be to go to the biggest city. Let's go to the city called Jerusalem. And so that's what they did. They went to Jerusalem. And because they were important people, it wasn't long before the people in Jerusalem were starting to form lines to see them coming in, because they were very different looking from the rest of them. And they asked people, do you know where this child lives that's going to be the new king? Because we want to go and give that child some gifts. And the people didn't know, but they thought the one person who would know would be their king, Herod. So they directed these travelers to the palace. And there was Herod. Now, when Herod heard that they were looking for a new child that was going to be king, he was mad, because he was the king and he didn't want anybody taking that away from him. So he said to these travelers, because he knew the old stories, and the old stories said that the child that would become king would be born in Bethlehem. And so he sent the travelers there, and he said, when you find this child that's going to be the new king, you come back and tell me, because I want to go and pay my respects too. Well, he didn't really, but that's what he told them. So they headed off, and sure enough, the star kept moving. And the star stopped right over a particular house. And when they got there, sure enough, there was this young child. And they knew as soon as they saw him that he must be a special child of God. And so they gave him gifts. They gave him gold, and frankincense. Want to smell that? Pretty strong, isn't it? And a spice, a liquid spice known as myrrh. Oops. So, we don't know how much time they spent there, but they spent some time there. And then they decided they weren't going to tell Herod about this child that might be king. And so instead of going back through Jerusalem, they took another road and went back to their land by a different road. I wonder how these travelers knew that that particular child was the special child. I wonder how they knew that. And I wonder what they felt when they finally met this little boy named Jesus. Think they felt jealous? Herod might have felt jealous. And I wonder why they decided not to tell Herod, tell this king. I wonder. Well, that's our story. And we're going to sing something, and I've forgotten what it is. The first Noel. How could I forget that? Verses 1, 2, and 3. And you're welcome to sing some of it with us, and then Julie has a special spice project for you in Children's Church. The first Noel.